I think we are now live. Can everyone see us that's here? If you have a look, everybody, in the right hand of your screen, there's a little button that looks like a little chat bubble. In there, oh, Kerry, lovely. You've already put in there, Kerry Marshall works at Staffordshire Network for Mental Health. Hello, Kerry, lovely to see you. But if anybody else wants to pop into that chat, any questions as you go along or anything you'd like to share, that's the vehicle to do that. So I want to start straight away because we have loads of yummy things to talk about. So welcome to everybody who is new and has not come to Online Care Club before. And also welcome to everybody that has already been. So a quick overview for those of you that don't know anything about Grace Cares. Grace Cares is a not-for-profit on a mission to make care sustainable. And we do that by selling pre-loved care equipment. So how can we help you? We have affordable care equipment, so please reach out if there's any care equipment that you might need. We have tea parties for the over 70s, so if you know anyone that might benefit from that, that would be really cool. We also do sustainable activities like kindness rock painting sessions. We give out hardship grants to unpaid caregivers and people over 70. So they're grants of up to £350. So that might be that you need a piece of care equipment. We can give you a grant for that. You might want to have some respite care come in. We can give you a grant for that. You might want to go on some trips or activities and you can't afford to go on them. We can provide grants for that. Whatever you are looking for support with, honestly, just reach out because we will review and take on board any requests that you might have. And obviously Care Club. So we have Care Club online, but we also have Care Club face-to-face in a venue in Lichfield. And in the summary email that will go out after this, I'll send you an email letting you know about our next face-to-face session and our next online session. But let's get straight into it because we've got some really lovely people here to support and help us today. So what is the agenda? We're going to have a word about Caregivers Connect, which is a yummy resource that will support unpaid caregivers from Michelle. We've got support from the lovely team at Anthony Collins, both Laura and Beth. And at that point, then we'll go into any question time and sharing. So remember to pop in the chat. So let me do some introductions. I'm Hannah. If you don't already know me, I probably should have introduced myself straight away. I'm one of the founders of Grace Cares. We have the lovely Laura and Beth, give us a wave, from Anthony Collins LLP. They genuinely care and they are here to want to help you. So if you really have any questions, please do reach out. They're the good guys. And we also have the lovely Michelle. If you've been on some of our sessions before, you may have met Michelle. Thank you for the wave. From Ontex, and they have a support framework called Caregivers Connect. So without further ado, Michelle, take over the slides and let us all know what Caregivers Connect's all about. And I'm going to put myself on mute because I can hear a bit of background noise. So I'm going to turn myself on mute.
Right, hi everyone. Yes, we've got a platform called Caregivers Connect. So the thought behind this is we know that there's a lot of people in the community that have to support people that they didn't intend to support. So it might be you're looking after children, it might be that you're looking after relatives or loved ones that maybe need extra help or care within the home, and you're thrown into these roles and you've got no clue what you're doing really. You're kind of just winging it, and it can be quite lonely and it can be really difficult at times. So we set up Caregivers Connect as a platform for lots of unpaid carers to get together, share their thoughts, share the things that they're maybe struggling with. But we've also got things on there that would help in both senses. So you've got things that will help with learning and how to care for the person that you're caring for, like hints and tips, what they should drink, what they should eat, the best way to do exercise. But then there's also a section that focuses on you, the carer. So there's meditation, there's podcasts, there's helpful trackers to maybe give yourself a bit of peace and be a bit more mindful about yourself. So we can send you the link afterwards, but there's a QR code on here if you want to scan that and take a look. So some of the things that are on there, we've got audio guides which goes through different breathing techniques. There's downloadable tools which you can get as soon as you log in, and it's just helpful charts to track yourself and the person that you're caring for. And there's a caregiver pack. There's plenty of blog posts that we post on there, and they're based off other people that are in this position and kind of their experiences of it all. And we've also got lots of videos on there that you'll find on social media as well. And they're just from other people in your position, trying kind of, there's a mom who looks after a disabled child, and she goes through, how rewarding it is, but also how difficult it is. And it can make her feel lonely sometimes. You'll see us on TikTok as well. Some of the videos have gone viral. We've got about 350,000 views. So it is a really, really big community. Like, you're not on your own. And then there is a forum on there. So if you did want to connect and find other people in your situation, you can do. You might make some friends on there. Or sometimes it's just nice to know that you're not the only person doing it. And we do provide webinars as well. So if you go on and register, you'll get an instant care pack, and then anything you need, we can help you with. So I'll pass you back to Hannah.
Thank you very much. I didn't know about your TikTok and going viral. I'm going to have to get on there. I'll get stuck in a rabbit hole. Awesome. Right. So next we have got Laura and Beth. I'm just going to let them go straight in. They've got so much yummy advice. I'm just going to let them take the floor. Thanks, ladies.
Oh, thanks, Hannah. And thank you for having us today, everyone. So my name's Laura Jordan. I'm a health and social care partner at Anthony Collins. Anthony Collins is a nationwide law firm. We only serve and support clients who make and improve the lives of our community and society. So we do a lot of work in health and social care, in government, in housing and charities. I've been advising in health and social care for over 20 years, and for 8 of those years I was legal director of a nationwide care provider. And my colleague Beth is here as well today. She is in our brilliant private client team, which act for individuals, and I'll leave Beth to just explain a little bit more about that and how we can support you today.
Yeah, so as Laura said, I'm Beth, and I'm in our private client team. So I do a lot of work kind of with families and people who want to make sure that their loved ones are protected and have got kind of that legal framework behind them to make sure that their loved ones are protected both now and in the future. So
should we move on the
slide ahead? So there's a few things that me and Laura are gonna go through on the agenda there. There's a lot of quite big topics, so we'll probably be a bit of a whistle-stop tour because there's a lot that we can say. So I'll just make a start, I think. So firstly, LPAs and making decisions on behalf of people who aren't able to make decisions for themselves. So a lot of you might already know this, but capacity is something that's decision specific. So somebody might have capacity to make one decision but not another. So for example, they might be able to have a budget for a week and know that's their budget to get their food shop, to get the newspaper, a coffee, go out, get the bus, whatever they need to do, but they might not have capacity to make decisions about their pension or their savings or investments, things like that, the bigger decisions. And it's the same with health and welfare decisions as well. Somebody might be able to decide what to eat for lunch, or what they should wear that day, but they might not be able to decide if there's a complicated medical treatment that they could have, but there's side effects, and weighing all those things up, that might be more than they can make a decision about. So there's different ways that people can help make decisions for people in those circumstances. The first one is a lasting power of attorney, and to put that in place, the person putting the LPA in place has to have capacity to do that. So they have to have capacity to decide who can make decisions on their behalf. If somebody doesn't have capacity, if they might never have had that capacity, or they might have just tipped over and no longer have that capacity, then there's another way that people can make decisions for them, and that's through the court of protection. So it's a special court that just deals with people who lack mental capacity. And people can be appointed, they're called deputies, and similarly to attorneys, they can make decisions on behalf of other people. And for both LPAs and deputyships, it can be for both property and finance decisions and health and welfare decisions. And so I'll skip on to the next slide. So for powers of attorney, both LPAs and deputies are governed by the Mental Capacity Act, which is kind of a really, really helpful piece of law. But there's kind of 5 key principles of LPAs, and the crux of it is that decisions should always be in the person's best interest, and they should be, at the centre of it, and protected as well. And that's what the Mental Capacity Act does for them. So as I said, to set up a lasting power of attorney, somebody has to have capacity to do that. So that might be something that's needs to be considered quite carefully. But having capacity to put an LPA in place is very different to having capacity to manage your own finances. So again, because it's capacity specific, somebody might be able to put an LPA in place, but not make those decisions about their finances. And so to set up an LPA, they decide who they want to act as their attorneys, who makes the decisions for them, and then it's like a document that's filled in by everybody, and it needs a certificate provided to sign to say that this person has capacity to put the LPA in place and they understand the consequences of it. So that can be kind of a solicitor or a medical professional, or somebody that's known the person for 2 years and is happy to sign that. So as I said, it's all governed by the Mental Capacity Act, and the Office of the Public Guardian also kind of oversees everything. So LPAs have to be registered with the Office of the Public Guardian before they can be used. And with a property and finance LPA, that can be used as soon as it's registered under the instruction of the person whose LPA it is. So even if somebody's physically incapable of, say, going to the bank, but still has mental capacity, they can instruct their attorneys to go to the bank for them, or pay that bill for them. If they can't use online banking, for example, it can be quite useful for that type of thing. Whereas with a health and welfare LPA, that can only be used when a person's lost capacity, and that's just because those decisions are so much more kind of person specific. So it's just to protect people in that sense. So with
LPA, you, Beth, we thought we'd, and you're doing a great job of showing what POAs are. We thought we'd cover this because we know that as carers, at some point, those people you are caring for may no longer be able to make decisions for themselves. So this is why we thought that you'd find this helpful. We've got situations, haven't we, Beth, where we support people to make lasting powers of attorney. It's a really tricky decision, isn't it, Beth, to know at what point you do that, I think. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those things that it's kind of better to bite the bullet, as it were, and get it sorted sooner rather than later, because then even if you don't need it straight away, you've got it and you've got it ready. And as Laura said, it's kind of an important thing it might be for the people that you're caring for, but also for yourself as well, so that you know that if you're not able to make decisions for them, there's somebody there who can take over as well. So it's really useful from kind of both angles to think about it and kind of get it sorted if you can, while you can.
And is it best to have more than one attorney, Beth? I mean, we had a situation on a matter I was working with last year where one of the attorneys was abroad, and his sister was in a care home and she had to be moved to another care home, and it was really tricky to get hold of them. Is it better to have more than one attorney?
Yeah, if that's possible, it is always. It just gives a little bit of flexibility and a little bit of backup, really. As Laura said, if something happens, if somebody's on holiday or if somebody's got their own health needs, for example, and they're in hospital, having multiple attorneys is a really helpful way of making sure that those decisions can still be made while they need to be made. And you can appoint replacement attorneys as well, so that if anything does happen to the attorneys, the replacements can step in. So if it's possible to appoint more than one, if you've got more than one person to help, it is a really good idea to do that. So with LPAs and deputyships for health and welfare, it might be that somebody isn't able to put a lasting power of attorney in place. They might have, lost capacity and can't do that anymore, or they've never had the capacity to do that. And there's different ways that can be dealt with. It doesn't mean that that's the end of the road, nothing can be done. So with finances, if somebody's only income is their benefits, and they don't really have much in the way of kind of assets in their own name, so savings or a property or anything like that, then it might be that everything can be sorted with an appointeeship. So somebody's appointed with the DWP to manage their benefits for them, and that can be quite a useful way kind of around needing an LPA or a deputyship. And then with health and welfare decisions, there's law in the Mental Capacity Act, which is really useful to kind of be aware of and to know, especially if you're kind of a caregiver for somebody, so that you've kind of got that in your back pocket. But essentially, as on the slide, section 4 says that anyone who's engaged in caring for a person or interested in their welfare should be considered in decisions. So that's a really useful kind of piece of law to make a note of and to have that kind of in your back pocket to get out if it's ever needed. But then if somebody does have assets in their own name, so maybe they have a property or they've got savings, but they haven't put in place an LPA or they can't, then you can go through the Court of Protection and be appointed as a financial deputy. And it's a bit of a longer process and a little bit more expensive, which is why it's useful to consider whether it is needed. But if it is needed, then it is similar to an LPA. Somebody can make decisions on their behalf, so you can be appointed as financial deputy and make decisions for that person. But it's a little bit more, there's a little bit more kind of structure behind it. So it's all governed by the Office of the Public Guardian again, but you have to submit yearly accounts to them, whereas you don't for a lasting power of attorney. So it's just a little bit different, and sometimes the powers that you have as a deputy can be limited. But yeah, it's a useful thing to know that it's there as a backup. But if you can put or the person can put an LPA in place first, and they're able to do that, that's always the easier way. So there's also, if you're looking at kind of the long term, and maybe if you wanted to leave something to somebody who might not be able to manage their funds for themselves, there's also other ways that you can do that as well. So you can use kind of your will or set up a trust, which I'll talk about in a little bit later, which would stop them kind of inheriting a large amount of money, for example, or just any money that would maybe put them over the benefits threshold, or that they just wouldn't be able to look after themselves. So that's kind of a way around it as well. So then for health and welfare decisions, again, you can be appointed as a deputy for health and welfare if somebody's not able to put an LPA in place for health and welfare. But it's a lot harder to be appointed. The court are more, they kind of take they see it as the general position would be they prefer to give you authority to make a one-off decision rather than kind of a general authority. And again, it's just to protect, because those decisions are, sorry, I'm just going to have to wave. The lights have gone off in this room. There we go.
While you wave, I was going to say, sometimes people think, don't they, Beth, that they are able to make health decisions, but actually legally they've only got finance for property and finance. So that it's always worth looking at what and I've had situations where relatives have come and said, I can make a decision about certain treatment and medication and go to the doctors, and actually when we've looked at the legal documents, they've only got appointeeship for finance and property. So there are also situations, I think, and you've seen this, Beth, haven't you, where there are different appointees for finance and property than there are for health and welfare. So it's really being clear on responsibilities, isn't it?
Yeah, no, definitely. And they are separate things, and they're two separate kind of documents in separate powers, but there is obviously a lot of overlap. Like if you're looking at care fees for being in a care home, for example, it's a welfare decision as to where somebody's living and the care that they're getting. There's also a financial impact of that. There's inevitably going to be kind of an overlap, but you can appoint different people. We'd kind of suggest, make sure they get on and they're going to talk to each other and they know that each other are appointed. But yeah, you can, different people have different backgrounds and different experiences. There might be somebody that you want to, make those health decisions, but you might not necessarily trust them to look after your finances particularly well, just because that's not what they're good at and what their skill set is, and that's absolutely fine. But yeah, as Laura said, an important thing is to check that there's always both. Well, not always both, but it's a good idea to have both.
Beth, can I jump in and ask while you're talking about it? We've had a message in the chat and it's probably best to answer it now while we're talking about this.
Yeah.
How long does it take to get a deputy? Is there a standard time frame or an average time frame? That's from Jess.
So for a deputy, it's not particularly quick, unfortunately. The court of protection are quite slow, so it can take, it's usually at least months. It can occasionally tip into like over a year, unfortunately. So it's one of those things that's better to get it, if you're looking at doing it, maybe get it done sooner rather than later. Because obviously during that time, nobody has authority to make those decisions. So yeah, unfortunately it is. If something's urgent, the court are pretty good at, dealing with urgent things,
Okay.
And making decisions quickly. But for just kind of a normal financial deputyship application, it can be quite a long wait, unfortunately, which is something hopefully that will change. But at the moment, it's not very fast.
No, perfect. Thanks for that, Beth. Thank you.
That's all right. So moving on from lasting powers of attorney and making decisions for people and deputyships and that type of thing, which is kind of more for the moment and for the now, looking into the future, it is something that, a lot of people might need to think about. We always say that, everyone should have a will. It's always useful to have a will in place, so that you have that reassurance that what you want to happen is going to happen with your loved ones, and the people that you want to receive things from you will get those. So most people have kind of heard of a will and know what they are, but they're essentially everything that you own when you pass away will pass under the terms of your will. So you can decide who gets what, how they get it, and if there's somebody that might not be able to get kind of a lump sum of money, you can put in place a structure that would protect them. And if without a will, the law governs what happens to your estate when you pass away, and they're very strict rules, so they don't provide that extra support if somebody needs it, and it can put people sometimes in difficult positions. So if there's somebody that you'd like to benefit in your will who wouldn't necessarily be able to look after money themselves, then you could set up a trust in your will. And a trust is essentially I like to think of it as a piggy bank, and you appoint people to look after that piggy bank for you, and it's a pot of money, and you say which people can benefit from it. So it could be your children, it could be family friends, it could be just wider family, and you say who you'd like to benefit, and then the trustees look after that money for them and decide when they get that money and how they get that money. So they can make payments on their behalf, or they can give them a small monthly budget, for example, rather than somebody having kind of a big amount that they wouldn't be able to look after. And that also then protects them, or protects their entitlement to means-tested benefits as well. Because obviously with the current cost of living and the cost of care, you'd have to be kind of a multi-millionaire to leave somebody money and then that cover all their living and care needs for the rest of their life. If for most people, something that you're going to leave in your will is not necessarily going to cover that, and then that person is going to have to re-enter the benefit system at a point when you're not there to advocate for them. So it's really useful to have something in place so that they're not in that position, so that their benefits can continue, and that money that you want to leave them can, add to their quality of life. It can pay for the things that you might already be paying for them, like, days out, winter coats, holidays, things like that. And so it's kind of a case of using that money to top up their needs rather than that money funding their needs. So I think I've accidentally skipped over that slide. So when you set up a trust, it's the trustees who will decide who will benefit from that. But they can be, as I said, it can be flexible. So they could decide, that money should be used for topping up care. If somebody, if an extra therapy session would be helpful for somebody, like music therapy or art therapy, something like that, that wouldn't necessarily be covered by the NHS, but it's something that would be really beneficial to somebody, that can be paid for from the trust. Or it could be, as I said, like a weekly budget or something that, would give somebody independence, but without them having to have the pressure of managing the money themselves. So when you set up a trust, you can decide who looks after it and who is a trustee. And the clues in the name, it should be people that you trust. But they have kind of the responsibility of looking after those funds. So it might be, that if they need to be invested, or if they need to be, if you leave a property into a trust, which is possible. A trust can kind of hold anything that an individual can hold, apart from an ISA. Anything can be put into a trust. So it could be property, investments, equipment, cars, things like that. Anything can be held by a trust. So if it's a property, the trustees would be, the ones, they might be looking after the utility payments, for example. But they decide who can benefit from the trust and when they benefit. So it's a lot of responsibility to give somebody. So that's why it should be people that you trust. But they can look at the circumstances at the time and make decisions in the best interest of the people that you want to benefit. And you might be thinking, oh, that sounds like a lot to put on somebody. They're going to make all these decisions. How are they going to know what I wanted? But you can also put in place a letter of wishes, which sets out kind of what you want them to use the trust for. So it might be, if say you've got a child, I did one recently, and some parents were setting up a trust for their son, and he loved to host parties. He'd hosted a Halloween party, a birthday party for all of his friends, and they thought that was really, really important for him to, maintain his friendships and have all those people in his life. So they put in their letter of wishes, we want money in the trust to be used for him to host parties, and he'd love taking his friends to the theatre, things like that. So it can be really, really personal to your person and what they like and what you think they need. And it can also, say what you'd want to happen if, when that person passes away, where you'd want if there's any money left over in the trust, what you want to happen to it then. So it can be a really helpful way of kind of your will, when you pass away, your will is made a public document, but your letter of wishes stays confidential. So it can be a really useful way of kind of putting in all that detail, but only your trustees will see it. And so you can really go to town on all the things that you'd like them to do with the trust. And then, so there's different types of trust. I won't really go into the detail of it, but there's basically loads of different types of trust that you can use. But in these circumstances, there'd be two that we'd usually suggest. And they kind of work slightly differently. And they can, depend on your circumstances. So, for example, you've got one person that's the main beneficiary. That's the only person you want to benefit from the trust. You could use a vulnerable person's trust, which is set up specifically to help people who aren't able to look after money for themselves. Or there's a discretionary trust, if you wanted to benefit more than one person. If, say, you have 3 children, one of them will need help to manage their finances, but the other 2, it would be helpful for them to have a little bit of support as well. A discretionary trust would be kind of a different way of leaving your money with that protection. So there's also different tax treatments for the different types of trust. But again, I won't bore you with tax because nobody wants to hear about tax at 10 o'clock in the morning. So yeah, but it's something to kind of think about as you're setting up your will in your trust. And it's something, if that we talk through with you, if you did want to set up a trust in your will. So I appreciate I've monologued a little bit, and it probably sounds quite complicated, which I won't lie, it is, but it doesn't have to be. But this slide is just kind of to highlight why it's important and why it's, you know, worthwhile committing a little bit of time to it, and a little bit of thought. So the alternatives are, you know, making an outright payment to somebody who wouldn't necessarily be able to manage that money. That might put them in a position where, you know, if they don't have an LPA, it might put them in a position where they need a deputyship, and then they have to go through that process with the court for somebody to manage that money for them, which might put them in a difficult position. It will probably impact their benefits if it pushes them over the threshold, and it also could just put them in a vulnerable position. You know, if somebody clocks onto the fact that, you know, somebody has got all this money but isn't able to look after it properly, it might make them vulnerable to, you know, to third parties, to other people. So you know, another thing that we see people think as an option is to leave the money that they'd like to leave to that person to a family member or to a friend, which is, you know, 100%, well, 99% of the time done with good intentions, but it might be that, you know, you then put that person in a difficult position. If they go through a divorce, for example, that money is theirs, it would be taken into account in divorce proceedings, in bankruptcy proceedings for them. It might impact their own benefits. It might be that, hopefully it wouldn't be the case, but it might be that that person isn't actually as trustworthy as you thought, and they've got this money and they're like, oh, okay, I can afford my round the world cruise now, I'm gonna go, see you later. And you know, hopefully that won't happen, but it is a risk, and there's not that protection in place, there's not that framework to make sure that, you know, they're looking after the money in the best way for the beneficiaries of the trust, for the people that you want to support most. So kind of as a summary, it is a complicated thing, but it is really useful. That trust can last for the rest of the person's lifetime, the rest of your loved one's lifetime, and be there to help them with the things that they need. It can, you know, pay for the days out that you might be paying for out of pocket at the moment. It can pay for, you know, if they need equipment or a car or adaptations to a house, for example, or, you know, even equipment, like care equipment, then it can cover all those types of things, and it can be used for pretty much everything. Anything can be put into a trust apart from ISA. So it could be that, you know, you leave your house into the trust, and then the person can live there rent free, and that's the benefit that they get from the trust. And you know that they've got the security of having somewhere to live, and they're not having to worry about rent payments and finding somewhere else to live, moving after you've passed away, and having so much change in one go. So yeah, they can be super flexible, which makes them really useful. So then just a few more things that are kind of useful to consider. If you have other family members who might want to benefit your loved one as well in their will, or during their lifetime, it's worth having those conversations with those people as well. A trust is not just something that you can set up in your will. It can be set up during your lifetime. You can have that as a pot of money that, you know, you can add to, or other people can add to, for somebody during your lifetime. And so that could be a good way of, if there's, you know, grandparents or other family members who want to benefit somebody, it can be really useful for them to, you know, leave money into the trust rather than to them outright in their will, because otherwise it puts them in that difficult position again. And then like looking at kind of pension and insurance nominations, things like that, just making sure that everything's covered so that there's no kind of accidental, oh, they've accidentally got some money from my life insurance policy, and all this stuff we've done with the trust and in our wills is kind of not ruined, but there's something else that's going to put that person in a difficult position instead. And then I think I mentioned at the start, but not powers of attorney, not just for a loved one, but for you as well. You know, making sure that you've got somebody who can take over making decisions for you and for somebody else. And in an LPA, you can put instructions and preferences in there as well. So if you're, say for example, you're regularly giving money to a loved one and gifting money to them for maybe for their rent or for clothes, food, whatever it might be, including that in your LPA so that if you lose capacity, people can still carry on making those payments to your loved ones so that there's still that protection for them. So I think we're nearly at the end of the wills bit, but there's also the power to appoint guardians, which is more prevalent for if you've got children under 18, but you can also indicate in your will, if somebody's over the age of 18, you can indicate who you might like to be involved in making decisions for them. It doesn't give them any legal authority, but it's a good expression of your wishes. If you can say in your will, I'd like this person to be involved, then if an application does have to be made for the court protection, that's really good evidence that that's what you wanted to happen and that's what you thought was in your loved one's best interest. And so it can be quite a useful thing to include. And then there's other things that can be dealt with in your will if you've got specific belongings, things like that. Then you can include reference to those in your will. So the last two slides are just really the things that it might be useful to think about before you put your will in place. So thinking about what you own, who you'd like to benefit, any liabilities you've got. So if you've got like a mortgage, will that impact? If you leave your property to somebody, will that be impacted if you've got a mortgage on your property, for example? So there's just some useful things kind of to think about before you put your will in place. But I appreciate it does sound complicated, and it does probably definitely sound overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. And once you've got it set up, you know that it's set up, you know that you've got it sorted. It's not a nice thing to think about. Nobody wants to think about what's going to happen when they're gone, but it's worth giving it some thought just to make sure that what you want to happen will happen, and you've got that peace of mind that it is sorted. You can then put it away, you don't need to think about it again, you can enjoy your life, but having that kind of peace of mind that it's sorted, the reassurance of it can be just it can really help you. So yeah, I'll hand over to Laura.
Yeah, I mean, I personally have a relative in supported living, and she's in her late 30s, but I can't advocate enough for making sure that you have in place all the right documentation around decision making and decisions in relation to health, and also forward planning in relation to wills and trusts for yourself. We've had to do it. It's hard, isn't it, to talk about the future, but it's really important because you just don't know what's going to come tomorrow. So I can't advocate enough, and Beth and her team and the private client team are so lovely to deal with. I think you always want a nice lawyer, don't you? Or nice advisors that are understanding and empathetic, because these are really sensitive issues. So do reach out if you do have any questions to Beth. I will go through very quickly a couple of areas which relate to your own rights as a carer, so your own legal rights. And then starting, and I will trundle through, get this, I'm going to make law really interesting in about 5 minutes, on the Employment Rights Act and the Care Act. So the Care Act is a piece of legislation that came into force in 2014, and it's, a lot of people think it's just to do with care fees and local authorities, but actually there is some little nuggets in there that help those people like you who support people, and support members of your family, friends, etc. So if you are a full-time carer, you have a right yourself. Sorry about the font on that. Look at that. I should put my glasses on. That's my fault. That's my fault. Here you go, glasses on. You have yourself a right to a carer's assessment. So every unpaid carer has a legal right. So this is in law. It's not just not just guidance, it's actually a legal right to an assessment for your own needs, regardless of the amount of care you provide or the eligibility of the person you care for. Because, you know, we know what you're doing is a full-time job and you're not getting paid for it. And what the state is doing under this law is looking and you know, what without you, if you're the person you're caring for would be, you know, they need you. So it's really important that your own mental health and your own well-being is checked. So if you haven't had one, get in touch with your local council about one. If you, I think it's important that you feel supported by your community and you feel supported by your local authority, because under the law you actually have parity. Parity means equality with the person you care for. And sometimes when I speak to individuals, I think, oh, it's all right, you know, they say, look, you know, I'm just there to help, and the focus is on the person you're caring for, and you love them very much, and I get that, but you're just as important and we all need you. So under the law, and that's recognised under law, which is great, you have the same legal standing as the person support. Your impact and the amazing thing you're doing, supporting your loved one, is recognised, and your well-being in your life is important. So please know that. I think a lot of unpaid carers I have liaised with in the past don't know that. And it's important to know that, and how what you're doing is recognised by the state. So you yourselves might be eligible for support, even if the person you care for declines help or is not eligible themselves. If you've given up work, you are also eligible for support benefits, and it's worth looking into this. I can tell you that now, because you know there are lots of ways you can receive benefits and support. Sometimes I find the system quite tricky and bureaucratic. And, you know, a lot of people say, oh, it's a minefield when I have to look into this and I don't understand it. But please, I always think, start from the overarching principle. You have a right to a care assessment. You have parity in law for the same person you are supporting, and therefore support can be provided to you directly or indirectly via the person you support, whether that's respite as well. There are respite options available to you. I know lots of amazing care providers locally and nationally that do offer respite packages if you need to go on holiday, if you need a weekend, and that respite can be funded by the local authority. So please look into this. There is legal provisions there to back up you if you're having to perhaps maybe enter into a discussion about that with the local authority, or if there's some pushback, because sometimes we know there can be. So please do. Just going on again about the Care Act, what it said, there's a real focus on well-being, which I love. You know, this is a really positive piece of legislation. So local authorities have to consider how you're caring, how what you do on a daily basis affects your physical, mental and emotional health. And it not just the basic principle of the Care Act is to act in the best interest of the people supported, but also yours as well. So to make sure that you know your well-being is promoted, that there are plans in place if anything happens to you, to make sure care is secured. So as I said, they must offer, and you can get in touch about an assessment. Sorry, I can't get my words out today. And following that assessment, there is a pathway that councils must consider and decide, and whether you and your needs have eligibility, and whether further support and a support plan for you is required, whether that's training, whether that's equipment, whether that's financial support, based on their duties to meet their legal duties to meet carers' needs. So there's lots of information out there on this, advocacy, advice. I know this Care Club is a wonderful forum for things like this. I mean, you've got people like Grace Cares around equipment as well, people you can reach out to. You know, I always know and have seen situations where people become a full-time carer overnight, following an incident someone ends up in hospital, then they're just discharged, and then you're like, oh my goodness, I don't have all the equipment, or I'm not sure what I've got a case at the minute where someone had a stroke and their husband had a stroke and the wife became a carer, pretty much had to give up her job overnight. And again, she had to call on the local authority for support, but also you might not have the right home or environment for that. So please know that there are support, and there are people, amazing people like Grace Care as well, around equipment for you, and there's lots of things. You're not on your own. I get asked a lot, and I'm really conscious of time, about what continuing healthcare is. So when people's health needs change and become more severe and they're still at home, and how that's supported and funded. And actually what it is, so NHS Continuing Healthcare is a care package fully funded by the NHS for adults with complex and ongoing health needs. So social care needs are funded by the local authority, health needs are funded by the NHS, and that cover things like care at home. Health needs can be covered in your home, domiciliary care, in a nursing home, in a care home, in supported living, in lots of different types of settings. It is, and I'm going to be really honest, not the easiest test, but what test is easy? So to apply for it, you have to be means tested, and there's an assessment in relation to continuing healthcare, and it is based solely on whether the person you think has an ongoing health need has a primary health need. So it's not on income, it's not on savings, it's actually to do with their health needs. So you could be assessed, I've seen one recently, by a district nurse or a healthcare assessor that will come out and look on behalf of the NHS about funding in relation to ongoing healthcare. Why this matters, and why this matters to carers, is it can significantly reduce the financial and emotional pressure on you by looking at whether the care needs can be assessed and supported and paid for. I think, as I've said, and I've tried to be very diplomatic here, and I do know a lot of people miss out on this because it's quite complex, and because the assessment process is crucial. But what I again would say is, do help and reach out perhaps to a multidisciplinary team. So if you're already talking to your GP, or so if you've got social worker support as well to help you through that assessment process. As I said, it's not easy, but there are people that understand it around you that be able to lead you through it. And in doing it, therefore, if you are successful, then those health needs will be fully funded by the NHS. But you've got to remember, you've got rights again. So another piece of really interesting legislation called the Health and Care Act 2022, which talks about unpaid carers being involved in decisions about a person's care, and that includes hospital discharge planning, and that includes situations involving continuing healthcare. So you have a right to be part of that, and sometimes I think people don't feel that, or don't feel confident to be involved in that. But no, you know who you're caring for better than anyone. And all I wanted to do is come on here today and give you the confidence that you do have the legal rights to be part of those situations. I mean, I've been in situations, as I said, with my relative where it's like, oh, leave this to the professionals. But actually, as I said, you have a legal right. You should be part of discharge planning. You should be any assessment in relation to health needs. You should be part of it. But also remembering what Beth talked about earlier in relation to appointeeship and that legal documentation, and that's all how this all knits together. And that's why it's all important to look out through it in one. I'm just mindful of questions. How long have we got, Hannah? Is it 10 minutes?
Yeah, we've got 10 minutes. And if there are any questions, pop them in the chat now. But yeah, I know a lot of people have had so many emails this morning going, we've had a bad night with such and such. But I get the catch up. So I'm sure there'll be catch up questions after, and everyone will be sent your emails and stuff. So don't worry, we'll sort it. If we don't get to that bit, we can do it after.
And that's fine, isn't it? We're in a people-based industry where people's needs and people's, things change really quickly, and people come unwell really quickly, or exactly. So no, that's fine. We understand. Very quickly on the Employment Rights Act, that's another piece of legislation. where the government are looking and exploring rights for carers. So this is actually one of the biggest pieces of employment legislation that's come out in the last 20 odd years. It's spearheaded by the Labour government and became law on the 18th of December 2025, where changes are being rolled out mainly for employers across the country over this year and next year. But there's something really special in this piece of legislation around carers leave. So you have the right to 1 week of unpaid carers leave per year following the Carers Leave Act 2023, and that was implemented. Gosh, sorry, I need another coffee to get these words out. In April 2024. But what's actually going on is following the Employment Rights Act and a review examining leave entitlement and whether paid carers leave should be introduced. I think it should. There's lots of online petitions around this that you can look at, or lobby your local MP. I know Mr. Dave Robertson, who's local to me in Lichfield, has picked this up. I've seen that, and he's a very good MP. He's standing behind things like this. So future changes are part of the Employment Rights Act. The actual government is looking at options for paid carers leave. So again, funding for you, and going back to that principle that your legal rights and your well-being is just as important as the person you care for. But there's also possible extensions to unpaid legal entitlement and additional interventions to help carers remain or enter work. They are looking at support around more respite funded placements, etc., and flexible working rights as well. Flexible working both across the UK and from day one of employment up to 2 years request. So I know some unpaid carers actually also have part-time jobs, and your employer should be mindful of your caring rights, and that's important, and they should be looking at reasonable adjustments. So if you do have a part-time job and that's not something that's come up in discussions or your reviews, then it really should. A good responsible employer should be making reasonable adjustments around your caring duties. These rights matter ultimately to not just improve job security, but financial security, but help you balance. So if you've got employment responsibilities and caring responsibilities, that's why it's important. And it all goes back to this point on well-being and protecting your well-being so that you can continue to deliver the great care you do to the person you love whilst also looking after yourself. So that's it. I think that's me. I'm done. I've done the law in 10 minutes. How good is that?
Boom, mic drop.
Yeah.
Laura. We have actually had a question coming from Sarah. So if CHC care package is decided to be appropriate and is fully funded by NHS, does that mean it is not means tested on the person getting CHC?
That's a very good question. When I've seen it, and I've seen it's based on someone's primary health needs, not their income and savings. But I am not a assessor, so apologies. All I know is the principles under the NHS Act, which talks about the focus being on primary health needs, not income and savings, unlike social care where they do look at that. So that is my initial response, but I can come back to you separately on that if you want something a bit more.
Yeah. Typey away, Sarah, if you do want that, because as Laura's very kindly offered, she can come back with more on that.
Yeah.
Any more in terms of questions? And I appreciate it's typing, and when someone tells me to type fast, my larger fingers mash the keypad, and I get very, very overwhelmed by it. So if anybody does have any questions, if you're digesting this or you're watching it on replay, which I know a lot of people will be, and you think, I wish I'd have asked that, or you have a shower ponder, as I often do, please just come back. So I'm going to go to this slide now. So as you'll see on the screen, we've got everybody's contact emails and a picture there. I've tried to be fancy with QR codes, and if you scan those QR codes, they should take you through to each person's LinkedIn page, if that's how you work and navigate through. If you don't worry about it. I was just trying to be fancy. emails will work fine. And those emails are also going to be, I think 30 minutes after this, an auto email comes out with everybody's kind of contact details, and there'll be the link to Caregivers Connect in there as well. Sarah said, thank you. I shall contact you, Laura. So I know.
Wow, I can say. Oh, sorry, Hannah.
No, you crack on.
Sarah, save you contacting me because you're probably very, very busy. So actually, I've just checked as well online, and it says actually if CHE is deemed appropriate and fully funded, then as I thought, no financial assessment is carried out on the person receiving care. It's on the primary health care. Income, savings, property or pension or assets are irrelevant, and the NHS pays 100% of a person's assessed care needs. However, what I will continue to repeat is that assessment isn't easy. There's lots and lots of questions on it, and it can be very I would advise getting support around those if you can.
Yeah.
Cool. Sorry to interrupt. I thought I'd do it now while you're here. Let's do it.
And it helps everybody else that'll be listening back, right?
Yes.
So get as much info in. But I think what everybody, Michelle, what you were talking about, Beth, what you were talking about, Laura, and what we're talking about at Grace Cares, you're just not on your own. You're doing a job that primarily props up our whole economy. Like, if we didn't have people supporting people that they love, we would be in a really situation. So, Laura's dog. Gorgeous dog. It's all right. There's someone at the door. Or he was just getting really passionate. You're not on your own. I'm going to help too. So
someone's at the door.
No, but just to reiterate, we will send you the link to Caregivers Connect. Everyone's contact details on there. Grace Cares is here to help. We are set up. We want to make care sustainable. Our ultimate goal is to help 1 million people. Our next measurement is to help 10,000 by 2028. Just come to us. We know wonderful people like Laura, Beth and Michelle. So we might not have the answers, but we're really good at signposting, and we will fight for you and fight with you, because that's what we're all about. Jess, if social care offers respite, can you use money for a private carer instead?
Oh, that's a good question. You can, although, and there's the point, isn't there, about personal budgets as well. So local authorities do offer people supported their own personal budgets to decide who they appoint, if that makes sense. I think it's worth talking to the social worker about it, to be honest, because I've seen some cases, you may have a preference as to who you use, and if you've got a personal budget, I think you've got the autonomy to do that. But and I've also seen perhaps some of the suggestions by the local authority as to who you use for respite might not be aligned with your needs or the person you're supporting's needs or preferences. So I think it's worth a conversation, actually. There is also, and not for today, there is a wider discussion about independent and personal budgets, which local authorities give to people, and care budgets, but that might just be for another time. So,
okay. So is that Laura saying that she'll come back with Beth? I think that's what she's saying. Woo! So just as a final one, if I go to each of you and just one tip or one thing you'd like people to take away from today that might be helpful, that's kind of your one tip. So Michelle, is yours to get onto Caregivers Connect, or is there something on there yummy? What would your top tip be?
Yeah, I think just looking at the section that's for yourself. So just so you don't forget yourself when you're doing all of this caring, like, you are important as well, and your mental health is just as important. So make sure you do the meditation or whatever works for you, but just remember that it's okay to have a break.
Yeah. What about you, Laura? What's your...
I think the same, actually, but also forward planning. We don't know what's coming, and that's why it's really important. And what some of the things Beth's talked about, I know when I listen sometimes I think, gosh, that sounds super serious, but when you're looking after someone you love, it's really hard to think about what happens if anything was to happen to you. But I think actually that's really important, because you just don't know what's around the corner. So I think forward planning, and getting that space and time to think about it, it's really important. And also looking after yourself.
Yeah. What about you, Beth?
I mean, I'm not really sure what more I can add. I think Laura and Michelle have summarised it very well. But yeah, I think it's one of those things that's hard to think about, and you always put it off. It's always falling off the bottom of the to-do list. But getting stuff in place while you can, and as Laura said, you don't know what's around the corner, but there is help out there. With all of it, there is so much support, and you know where to look for it. With Grace Cares and everything else, there's help out there. So ask for it if you need it.
Yeah, exactly. Don't be scared of asking for help. I think that is a really lovely note to kind of end on. So a massive thank you. If everybody at home, I know we can't hear it, but claps to say thank you to Michelle, Laura and Beth for their time, their advice and their knowledge. And just thanks for coming, and thanks for everything you do, and hope to see you on the next one. Bye, everyone. See you later. Bye. Ending the live.